Good morning, y'all. Well, I must say that I've never said this before to a church I go to, and I go to a lot of places, but it's plumb good to be here. You know, I was sitting here, and I was thinking as I was sitting there, do you realize, Mary Lou, it was 30 years ago this weekend that we first come here? 30 years ago. That was the first weekend in February. And as we walked in, the music caught Mary Lou's ear, and we sat down, and we were sitting right about where Danny is. And actually, she said, I can't see who's playing the piano, but that's Danny playing the piano. And she knew his style back from SMC. And the preacher that day was a preacher y'all had that didn't stay long. He left shortly after we came here. And he said something that I'd never heard before. He said, now, if I say anything that you can't find in the Bible, leave. Don't listen to me. And I thought that was quite interesting. This church is not a normal church, I tell you. You know, it was good to be in Sabbath school this morning and see that foundation still here. A church called me this week, a physician who's the head elder at his church, and they're having some challenges going on right now. And I shared with him counsel that y'all taught me here. And I asked back in the back if it's still true, and yes, it's still a procedure here. And let me tell you something that happened behind closed doors in an elders meeting. I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, but let me tell y'all something. It was in this church. We were looking for a new associate pastor. Do you remember that? And we went to a local restaurant, and the conference president came up. And he says, I've got the man for you. Now, he's my man, and you leave him alone. He says, I don't care what music he plays. I don't care what he does, where he takes the kids. He's my man. Just leave him alone, and I will give you an associate pastor, youth pastor. Do y'all remember that? And do you remember what all of us voted for unanimously? Take his youth pastor back to Charlotte. That's the kind of church y'all have here, and y'all are blessed. You really are. This morning, I'd like to share with y'all something that's dear to my heart. How many of y'all believe that Jesus is coming soon? You believe so? I believe so. And I believe in something called preparing. And as y'all remember, I was part of the fire department, something I started at SMC, and I continue today. And I was on the Randleman Fire Department when we lived down in Randleman. And we find in the fire service that preparation is very important. And I go into the school system each year, and I teach the kids. Do you know, now, Dan and I were at SMC back, 40-something years ago. And actually, it's been 40 years ago tomorrow that Mary Lou and I started dating down at SMC. But I joined the fire service 42 years ago. And today we have much less structure fires than we did when I started. And the United States Fire Administration says that is because of two major things. One is we have better wiring codes today. But number two is this right here, where we go in the school system and we teach the kids about fire prevention. And as we go in there and we teach them year after year after year, and as children grow up and they become moms and dads and have their own homes, those practices are put into place, and we see less structure fires. We go and we teach the kids about stop, drop, and roll. We have our firefighters come in, and we show them that we're not Darth Vader coming in, and not to run in the closet, not to run under the bed, to come to us when their house is on fire. We have a little fun, and we go in and teach. And actually, that firefighter right there in the black is Carson. Carson was born when we lived here. Carson turns 30 this coming July. It's hard to believe, isn't it? He was born while we were going to church here. This is a car wreck that I came upon, and actually I saw this wreck. What would happen if the firefighters who got off that fire truck said, and that door the driver's door, it had to be pried open. And what if the guys had not prepared? What if they had never learned about how to use Jaws of Life, and they got off the truck and when one guy says, "You get Jaws and I'll read the manual." Is that a good idea? That door had to be pried open, and we had to fly that guy out. I apologize, I was late this morning coming because I was following through on preparation. Last night we had a significant wreck. Two cars wrecked at home, head on. All three occupants in combination of both vehicles were killed. And so this morning I was applying the process of getting our guys help. Especially one fatality, our guys do pretty well. But when we get into 2, 3, especially 3 fatalities or more, our guys start having some challenges working through that. And so this morning while I was at the hotel, I was working on getting that team to go in and take care of those guys. It was 2 fire departments that were involved. Those guys need help today. Preparation. You know, we said, well, in a couple of days, and the guys were having problems, and we say, well, maybe we need to help those guys. No, let's jump on it. Let's nip it in the bud. And so that was happening this morning. This is a situation where we had a family that came in. Thank you. We had a family that came in from North Carolina over to Waterville, which is the very first exit, getting off I-40 on exit 451. It's a rafting area. It's the Pigeon River. It's the #1 rafted river in the United States. Starts here in North Carolina and runs into Tennessee. And there in Hartford, it's where we have 11 rafting companies. This couple and their 2 daughters, they were driving from Asheville, headed over to Tennessee, and the little girl had just got her driver's license. Y'all remember when we got her driver's license? You know, "Daddy, can I drive? Can I drive?" And they're driving off I-40, and that's too dangerous. And so they get off the exit 451. "Daddy, can I drive? Can I drive?" And he goes, "Okay, this looks like a safe road." And so he gets out. Mom gets in the back seat. Dad gets in the front seat. Daughter gets and starts driving. Oh, it's a narrow road. And as she's driving, she comes off the road, and her right tire comes off. Well, what's the kid do? Jerks it to the left, stomps on it, and launches into the Pigeon River. That is their car right there. Now, is that a time for the Swiftwater team to say, or guys that we don't even have a Swiftwater team, the guys say, "Let's see, how do we do Swiftwater rescue? Let's get out the manual." No, you got to know how and jump into it and act fast. Nobody perished. Or let's say we have a structure fire. Is that the time to say, "I need to learn fire behavior. How do I use this nozzle?" No, you've got that lieutenant who just ran around. He's done a 360. Is there any kids hanging out the back window upstairs? Is anybody out there asking for help? Is there a propane tank in the back? And he comes around, he's done his 360, and now we're ready for attack. Why? Because we have prepared. Preparing is so important. And y'all, there's a battle now. Do you believe there's a battle now? Absolutely. But do you believe there's a battle to come? Yes. What does Daniel 12:1 say? It's going to be a battle worse than anything has ever happened. When Michael stands up, it's going to be worse than ever. You know, we see terrible, awful things. I definitely see terrible, awful things in the fire service. But my eyes were plumb opened when I went to Rwanda. I go over and teach in Rwanda, and we have a program that we teach over there, and it's doing quite well now. And they've just jumped on it like a tick on a dog, and it's working well. And I learned about, I remember, I was here. I was here when we were dealing with the Rwanda situation. And, or maybe it's the year before I came here, somewhere right in there. It was in 92, so it had to be the year before I moved here. And do you remember the genocide? Do you remember that? Over 1 million people were killed in how often? How long? 100 days. Over 1 million people. The Hutus killed the Tutsis. And you could in an Adventist church, have Hutus and Tutsis in the same church. And there's a guy here from Kenya. Where's he? Yes, you remember that, don't you? Were you living in Kenya? And so it came time that the Hutus decided to kill the Tutsis. And as I went through the Genocide Museum, as I listened to stories, the conference president, his wife and 8 children were slaughtered by machete. Danny, how would you handle that? Are you ready for that? And they told us stories, and I will not tell y'all what happened to the children because there's children here. And what happened to the wives. I won't tell you what happened to the wives in front of the husbands. It was satanic. And I'm sure you heard about that over in Kenya. What happened? A time as never before. It's going to be worse than that. Are you ready for that? It's going to be worse than the Reformation. How many of y'all have read Great Controversy? And you've read the stories of the Waldensians and the wife sitting there as the husband's burned to the stake? Are y'all ready for that? And so this morning I'd look at how do we prepare the brain for battle, both for now and to come. Preparing is so important. Number one is the fuel that you put in the brain. Now, looking at fuel, anybody know how much that car runs? Anybody have a guess? How much? 50? 250,000? Oh, 450,000? Try $8.5 million. Now, do you think that they're going to put kerosene in that car? You think they're going to put diesel in that car? They're very cautious on what they put in that car. How about this car? It's a Bugatti, special Bugatti, $18.9 million. Now, that's just plumb crazy. And then there's this car. Now, that car, the driver was not happy with it. He bought it in Newport. And then it had 800 and some horsepower. His first gas tank, the computer said he got 2-point-some miles to the gallon. And you will be the only church that's got this answer right. And he decided he wanted more power. This man is 70-some years old. And he sent it to this fella in Level Cross, North Carolina. Who did he send it to? I told you, you're the only church that got that one right. He went and sent it to Mr. Petty and his crew. Mr. Petty cranked it up between the engine and the NOS to 1,500 horsepower, 1,500 horsepower. That's more than the Bugatti. Mr. Petty told this man, he says, you can no longer buy your fuel at the gas station. You have to buy your fuel probably from the airport. It has to be 115 octane. And this man told me that Mr. Petty told him you no longer get miles per gallon, you now get miles per tank. And Mr. Petty took first gear out of it because it just squallets tires in first gear. And he says, don't park it, when you park it, do not park it with the tires turned because it just do a victory spin. And so when he parked it, he had to have his tires always just straight. It's a powerful car. His boys will not even ride in that car. It is so powerful. But the fuel is very important of what you put in that car. Would you agree? Well, I was trying to figure out how to get a manual, and so I found a manual in this S Cabriolet. And let me read to you what Mercedes says. They say, note, damage caused by wrong fuel. Even small amounts of the wrong fuel could result in damage to a fuel system, the engine, and the emission control system. Never refuel using diesel. Now, you'd think it's just horse sense, right? But there are people who make the mistake and put the wrong fuel in, and I won't go into those stories. But anyway, gasoline more than 10% ethanol, gasoline more than 3% methanol, gasoline with additives containing metal. So they're very specific on what fuel needs to go in that vehicle. Do we need to be specific on what fuel goes into us? Yes. This is interesting. If you accidentally refuel with the wrong fuel, do not switch the engine on. I remember one time at Collegedale, we had a fire one night late at night, and it's so nice I can talk and y'all understand me. Sabbath school really affirmed that. Listen to the teacher and the rest of y'all talk like I do. I was in Atlanta a couple of weeks ago, and there were people from the Caribbean. They had no idea what I was saying. And they were in Atlanta, but it was a Caribbean church. And so what happened was one night, it was late. It was actually early in the morning. We had a fire, and the driver of the fire truck comes up, and we had 2 fuel tanks, one diesel, one gas, because some of our trucks were diesel, some of them were gas, and he put the wrong fuel in the truck. Fortunately, he caught it before he cranked it, and we had to leave the truck, and our mechanic, Jimmy, had to come over and drain the fuel. And so it says here, if you accidentally refuel with wrong fuel, do not switch the engine on. Now this is interesting, look at this. Even small amounts of the wrong fuel could result in damage to the fuel system and the engine. The repair cost, does it say could be? It says are high. Is there any time that we stick something in our mouth and we go, that shouldn't be there? Could it damage our system? Could the repair cost be high? Yes. The brain is the organ and instrument of the mind and controls the whole body. In order for the other parts of the system to be healthy, the brain must be healthy. In order for the brain to be healthy, the blood must be pure. If by correct habits of eating and drinking, the blood is kept pure, the brain will be properly nourished. And so many times I wondered in healthcare, which is first? You know, what happens in the brain, what happens in the body? It's very clear here. God has pointed it out to us. Before you treat the body, you must treat the brain. And the way you treat the brain is by taking care of the blood. And the way you take care of the blood is by what? What you stick in your mouth. Eating and drinking. And yes, it's true. The other laws of health are very, very important. But it's very important of what we stick in our mouth. And as we look here at what we read this morning, see, God could have said, whether therefore you do all to the glory of God. And that would have been all-inclusive, would you agree? And that would have been fine. But God loves us. Does He love us? Does God love us? Yes, He does. And so He said, listen, do everything, but it's really important, y'all, what you stick in your mouth, what you're eating and what you're drinking, because that can be very, very important. Now I'm reading from Harvard. Now let's see what the science folks say. Think about it. Your brain is always on. It takes care of your thoughts and movements, your breathing, your heartbeat, your senses. It works hard 24/7, even while you're asleep. This means your brain requires a constant supply of fuel. That fuel comes from the food you eat. And what's in that fuel makes all the difference. Put simply, what you eat directly affects the structure and function of your brain and ultimately your mood. Now, what are we talking about today? Preparing the brain for battle. So that's why we're talking about the brain. And we're talking about the food that goes into our bodies to make good, healthy blood, to be fuel to the brain, can make a difference of how well that organ works. What is the most important organ in the body? The heart. What else? The brain. Why the brain? It controls everything. Even more important than that, it's how you talk with God. That is our communication tool. Ability to talk with God is the function of the brain. And yes, if you're hurting throughout your body, it does make a difference in how you can discern. But the brain function is imperative in our discernment, in our prayer, in hearing the Holy Spirit. When the Holy Spirit goes, no, Walt, don't do that. Or Walt, you better do that. And so the fuel that we put in our mouth that provides the blood with the proper nutrients determines how well that brain functions. Just like those cars. If you put kerosene in that car that Mr. Petty rebuilt down there, do you know that car had 300 miles on it when Mr. Petty totally ripped it apart and rebuilt it? Amazing. But you got to put the right fuel in it, Mr. Petty said. Like an expensive car, continuing with Harvard, your brain functions best when it gets only premium fuel. Eating high-quality foods that contain lots of vitamins and minerals and antioxidants nourishes the brain and protects it from oxidative stress, the waste, free radicals produced when the body uses oxygen, which can damage cells. So the fuel that we put in our body, you've got to have fats, proteins, carbohydrates, and then you have a catalyst, which is vitamins, that kicks on fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. But then you got another catalyst that's minerals that kicks on the vitamins, which then kicks on the fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. So important. And so much of our food does not have those because of hybridization. Did you know it's that time of year? Anybody put in? I know y'all do gardening here. How many of y'all doing gardening? Let me ask a question real quick. I ask this in every church that I go to, and I think y'all are going to beat them. How many of y'all were born in this county? How many of y'all? How many of y'all from central North Carolina originally? Okay. How many of y'all from North Carolina? Raise your hands high. Yeah. How many of y'all from the South? Yes. I knew y'all would. Okay. It's amazing. Isn't it so cool to come back 30 years later and see folks still running the church? It's so good. I appreciate y'all. So North Carolina, University of North Carolina, Department of Agriculture found that hybrid seeds uptake only approximately 40% of the nutrients out of the soil that an heirloom seed would pull out. Let me say that again. A hybrid seed pulls out of the soil approximately only 40% of the nutrients that an heirloom seed will pull out and put in that tomato or whatever else you're growing. That's huge. And this is another cool thing. And I learned this just last year. I've gone back to school again. And when you have an heirloom piece of food, it doesn't have a good shelf life. And the reason it doesn't have a good shelf life is there's chemicals in it that start breaking it down. And so what they did is they went and hybridized the food so that they got rid of some of this chemicals that's in there that causes it to rot faster. And you know what them chemicals are? Amylase, protease, and lipase. Now, that's very important from the first third of digestion. And God put it in our food, enzymes, digestive enzymes, to help, because the other parts in our saliva, as I talk to the kids in the school, I teach them about spit. And you got to chew and mix the spit with the food so it soaks up the saliva into the food so that the enzymes are there to break it down. Well, God put enzymes in our food, but we have, in order to have a longer shelf life, hybridized out those enzymes, and now we don't have adequate enzymes. And so research shows us the organs in the body are actually having to overwork, or you're even lack of enzymes, therefore you're not breaking the macro into micro nutrients, so they'll be soaked up in the villi. Unfortunately, just like an expensive car, your brain can be damaged if you ingest anything other than premium fuel. Continuing from Harvard, if substances from low premium fuel, such as what you get from processed or refined foods, gets to the brain, it has little ability to get rid of them. That's really interesting, isn't it? So you got a Twinkie and you eat a Twinkie. The brain has a hard time getting rid of the Twinkie or other processed foods. Diets high in refined sugars, for example, are harmful to the brain. In addition to worsening your body's regulation of insulin, they also promote inflammation and oxidative stress. Multiple studies have found a correlation between a diet high in refined sugars and impaired brain function, and even a worsening of symptoms of mood disorders such as depression. WHO, World Health Organization, says that we're about to surpass the number one diagnosis in America. The number one diagnosis in America today is stress, and what's about to surpass stress is depression. Also this morning, I was working on a call. I got a call from our chaplain, and he said out on Facebook, one of our firefighters was having some challenges last night. I talked to our emergency medical director for the county. He said, Walt, one of your guys is having problems, depression, talking some bad stuff. You need to check on it. Depression, it's a huge issue out there. He was talking about ending life last night. That's big stuff. You take that serious. It makes sense. If your brain is deprived of a good quality nutrition, or if free radicals or damaging inflammatory cells are circulating within the brain's enclosed space, further contributing to brain tissue injury, consequences are to be what? Expected. Expected. It's expected if you put diesel in your gas burner car, there is going to be problems. Yes? It's expected that if you put gasoline in your diesel burning tractor, there's going to be problems. It's just expected. That's physiology. And the same thing is true with our body, according to Harvard. What's interesting is that for many years, the medical field did not fully acknowledge the connection between mood and food. That was interesting to hear Harvard say. Today, fortunately, the field of nutritional psychiatry is finding there are many consequences and correlations between not only what you eat, how you feel, and how you ultimately behave, but also the kinds of bacteria in your gut. And we could talk all weekend on gut biome. MIT is doing some amazing research on gut biome. We have to protect what's going in our gut. And I'm trying to remember this if I'll talk about it this afternoon. The 75% of your immune system is dependent on what's going on in your gut. Anybody ever ridden one of these? What if, instead of putting coal, he put toilet paper? Is it going to make it up the mountain? No, you've got to have the right beet to use. Fuel. Best fuel for the brain, avocados, number one. Beets are good fuel, blueberries, broccoli, celery, green leafy vegetables, rosemary, turmeric, potatoes, asparagus, walnuts. I talked to a boy yesterday. He's wanting more energy. So I was encouraging him to do some more things with energy, and it did not deal with meat. He says, no, I got to have meat. He says, I don't eat vegetables and fruit. I eat meat. I said, buddy, what do elephants eat? They're strong. Or how about Clydesdales? Or, giraffes? Or gorillas? I miss going over to the zoo and seeing the gorillas over there. Y'all have a tremendous zoo. Best zoo I've ever been to. The big animals, they don't have to eat meat. The second key, WHO and the CDC says, is the importance of exercise. Psychology Today, it's a journal for psychologists. It says, neuroscientists around the globe agree that physical activity is the best medicine to maintain brain health throughout one's lifespan. The best medicine, the best medication for your brain, according to these neuroscientists around the world, is exercise. There's a guy at Duke, Dr. Walter Kempner. He was a genius, very smart man. German. Not only was a physician, he was also, I think it was a PhD in biochemistry. And as you look at when we grew up in school, we had morning exercise, recess. We had recess after dinner. Now I'm a country boy, dinner's at noon. We had recess after dinner. We had recess in the afternoon. And then we played when we got home. And this physician at Duke found that adults need the same thing. We need to exercise 4 times a day for optimum health. It's very, very important. Exercise improves the structure, function, and connectivity of your brain. Psychology Today also reports there are many reasons that exercise is good for your brain. These include increases blood flow, which improves cerebrovascular health, the release of neurotropic factors like BDNF, which stimulates the growth of new neurons, and the benefits of glucose and lipid metabolism, which bring nourishment to the brain. People who regularly perform aerobic exercise, running, jogging, brisk walking, swimming, cycling, have greater scores on neuropsychological function and performance tests that measure certain cognitive functions, such as attentional control, inhibitory control, cognitive flexibility, working memory, declarative memory, spatial memory, and information processing speed. How good your information processing speed? Anybody ever ask you a question, you go, or even where the keys are? The transient effects of exercise on cognition include improvement in most executive functions, attention. I think some folks need more exercise there. Attention, working memory, cognitive flexibility, inhibitory control, problem solving, and decision making. Y'all, we're preparing the brain for battle, a time as never before. Do we need these functions in our brain to work well? Are we presented with temptations that we need these items working? Yes? Quickly. Not to think about it tomorrow and go, I wish I didn't do that. Have you ever done that? That was stupid. You ever done that? Well, it needs to be fast. You know, I remember when Lotus came out. Y'all remember Lotus? And I remember going over to Durham and learning how to use spreadsheets with Lotus. And you'd hit F7 on these big budgets. And it would take about, a minute to crunch them numbers. A minute. And we're sitting there, and this boy from Raleigh, he's sitting beside me. And his number in about 3 to 5 seconds is crunched. And we did it again, and we'd hit F7 to do the calculation, which is a whole lot faster than rewriting budgets, I can tell you that. But it was just fast. And I said, what did you do to your machine? And he says, nothing. I said, no, you did something to your machine. What did you do? He said, well, I increased my processor from whatever chip it was, from 2 meg to 4 meg RAMs, his memory. Now, I mean, today, that's nothing. But we need to be, today when you hit it in there, boom, you got an answer, right? When you hit enter, boom. And that's how we need to be when Satan comes and dangles something in front of you. You don't need it to be a while. No, that's wrong. I ain't doing that. Or, yes, God, I'll do that right now. Exercise makes that processing speed increase so that we can make those discernment decisions. And information processing speed for a period of up to 2 hours after exercising. Students, how many of y'all are in school? If you want to make better grades on your tests, exercise within 2 hours before a test, and your processing will be better. You'll do better on your scores. Water. Adequate hydration. Our brains depend on proper hydration to function optimally. Brain cells require a delicate balance between water and various elements to operate. And when you lose too much water, that balance is disrupted. Your brain cells lose efficiency. Years of research have found that when we're parched, we have more difficulty keeping our attention focused. We need a lot of people drinking water. Dehydration can impair short-term memory function and the recall of long-term memory, both short-term and long-term. The ability to perform mental arithmetic, like calculating whether or not you'll be late for work if you hit the snooze button for another 15 minutes, is compromised when your fluids are low. And the question is, how much water do you drink? According to the University of California at Davis, it takes a half a gallon, 4 water bottles, 2 liters to run a 5-year-old. A half a gallon, 64 ounces, 2 quarts, 2 liters, 4 water bottles, all equal 64 ounces, basically. That's how much it takes to run a 5-year-old. Is anybody in here 5 years old? Who's 5? Okay, can you stand up a minute so we can see you? Most of us are a little bit bigger than when we were 5 years old. For that little young'un, according to the University of California at Davis, it takes a half a gallon to run his brain and the rest of his body. Well, they find from his size up to 128 pounds is actually the same amount of water to sit on the couch. But if you're out exercising, sweating, you need even more. you could need another quart to 2 quarts. Now, the state of Tennessee tells me I'm to drink a gallon of water a day in the event that I might have to fight a house fire today. And then once in rehab, I got to drink more water. Over 128 pounds is body weight divided by 2. That's pretty standard out there across the America today in healthcare, is body weight divided by 2, unless you're just super big. I had a lady call me the other day. She was 400 and some pounds. And so there's an extra special figure for her. There's another calculation for her. She didn't need 200 and some ounces of water a day. But let's say you weigh 200 pounds. How much water do you need to drink? 100 ounces to sit on the couch. But if you're out exercising, working in the garden, talking, let's say you're a school teacher, you need even more because you're letting fluids go as you're talking. It's going out your breath. And so that's only one part of the equation. A year ago, I was in a class and for school, and the professor had us to. The first week, it was a class that we looked at labs, a lot of different labs. And so one of the items that we had to monitor was hydration. And he had all of us in class measure our hydration for a week. Most everybody was dehydrated that whole week. The next week, he had us use the formula. If you're 128 pounds or less or 128 pounds or more, the formula I just gave you, we followed that for 1 week. Most everybody was dehydrated. Well, what's going on here? Well, what he did is he introduced us to, we learned this back in physiology in school, but he gave us some history behind it. We learned something about free flow. Did y'all in school and healthcare learn about free flow? Well, they taught us about free flow in A&P years ago, but what happens is this physicist who was buddies with Einstein, who was another He was a physicist, real brainy guy. He found out that when you drink more than 3 to 4 ounces of water at a given time, it goes into free flow. You just urinate it off. So have you ever drank a glass of water or drank a water bottle and not long later you had to go run the restroom? Because you had free flow. And what he found was, if you will do this, that much water, 3 to 4 times every half hour based on your size. If you're small, 3. If you're larger, 4. Every half hour, except, this was interesting, he said 15 minutes before you eat, while you eat, an hour after you eat. A buddy of Einstein knew that. Have we ever heard that? Not to drink with meals? Interesting, huh? So that next week, we all did that. The next week, every one of us, every single day that we tested, and we tested our multiple labs every day to learn how to do it. And so everybody in the course were hydrated that next week because we took the body weight divided by 2. We then did this 3 or 4 times, making sure it was just throughout the day. And it's, I'm an old farm boy. I grew up on a farm. It's just horse sense. You take a 5-gallon bucket and you pour it on a mater plant, what's going to happen? It's going to run off. But if you have a drip line, you're going to have better saturation. And the same thing is true with our body. The effects of hydration on the brain function depends upon the severity of dehydration. Mild dehydration may adversely affect mood, energy level, and ability to concentrate. Now, what is God's mission? To save humanity. What is Jesus' mission? To save humanity. What is our mission? To point the sin-sick soul to Christ. Yes? And are we all sin-sick souls? Yes. And so, if you are a person who has mood issues, do you think somebody wants to have what you're trying to give them? Danny warned me I might better take this thing on here. So if you're trying to tell a person that you need to be a Christian and you're mean as a striped snake, do you think they want to be part of you, what you're belonging to? No. Dehydration can affect your mood. Ability to concentrate. Do we need to concentrate? Yes, we do.
Severe or prolonged dehydration, according to Mayo Clinic, dehydration may cause serious cognitive impairment, delirium, permanent brain damage, or even death. Now, that's major dehydration. But it definitely can cause cognitive impairment significantly. Just a mere 2% drop in body water can trigger fuzzy short-term memory, trouble with basic math, and difficulty focusing on the computer screen or a printed page. And that's work issues. Batmangiati. Who's ever read Dr. Batmangiati? If you want to read and learn about hydration, Batmangiati is a physician. He's probably the expert out there. He wrote a book called Your Body's Many Cries for Water. If you want to learn more about hydration and help your patients or your clients or your family, read that book, Your Body's Many Cries for Water. Amazing book. He says every function inside your body is regulated by and depends on water. Every function inside the body is regulated by and depends on water. I have people who come in to see me as I sit down and talk to them about their health issues, and I say, how much water do you drink? Well, I don't ever say, do you drink enough water? Because that enough is a huge disparity. How much water do you drink? And I have folks say, I don't do water. Well, what do? I do Mountain Dew. And I had this one fella came in for diabetes. I said, how much Mountain Dew do you do? And he says, I do 3 liters a day. 3 liters of Mountain Dew a day. And you can imagine some of the issues he's having there with why he has diabetes. And so as people come in, they'll say, well, can I count my coffee? I used to have folks come in and say, can I count my moonshine? Literally, they did. I think those guys have died off now. They don't say that anymore. But we're now told for every cup of coffee, you need to drink 6 cups of water to replace what that cup of coffee did to you. So every cup of water, or every pot of water, or 2 pots of coffee, you need 6 times that amount in water to make up for what that coffee did to you. Water must be available to carry vital elements. Back in school, they taught us, they said that water is the train car that carries the nutrients. As we eat the food, as it goes into the blood, water is what carries. It's the train car that carries the nutrients throughout the body. And this is what Batmangiati is talking about here. Water must be available to carry vital elements, oxygen, hormones, and chemicals to all parts of the body. And this is interesting. Without sufficient water to wet all parts equally, some more remote or distal parts of the body will not receive the vital elements that water supplies. Well, what are those vital elements? It's the nutrients that it's carrying. Sunshine. Vitamin D boosts cognitive acceleration. In a study led by scientists at the University of Manchester in England, they looked at vitamin D levels and cognitive performance in more than 3,100 men aged 40 to 79, in 8 different countries across Europe. The data showed that those people with lower vitamin D levels exhibited slower cognitive processing speed. I had a lady send me her labs yesterday. She's down in West Palm Beach, Florida. Her vitamin D was in the 20s. Labs tell us today. Used to, when I went here to church, we would say, 32, that's good. No, it's not. Labs will tell you 30 to 60, to 99, but that's not accurate. Dr. Arvo Khanna, a neurologist who specializes in brain function, he tells his patients he does not want their vitamin D below 60 for cognitive function. Dr. Ted Watkins, a good friend of mine, we used to work together. He's a surgeon outside of D.C. Now he does lifestyle medicine. If you want good immune system, if you want good bone health, ladies, he says at least 80, better yet 90 to 100. Vitamin D is important. I had a lady come in one day. Well, I've got a good friend of mine, and some of y'all might know him. He's a physician. And he says, all you need is 5,000 IUs a day, and you're good. Nobody needs more than 5,000 IUs. I had a lady come in. Well, let me back up. So the last time I went to Africa, I took a friend of mine. He's a physician down in South Georgia. He's a black fella. And we went over there, and we were teaching physicians and nutritionists over there that the government had asked us to train in lifestyle medicine. And he told these black physicians and black nutritionists in Rwanda, he says, we have sunglasses on our skin. It takes 6 times more sun exposure to get the same amount of vitamin D as it takes for Walt. 6 times more. So this lady takes that information. This lady comes in, she's Caucasian, she works in landscaping all year round, and she takes 5,000 IUs, and her vitamin D level is 12. So I said, okay, let's jump it. Let's go 5,000 twice a day. So we're doing 2,000 a day. We'll do that for 3 months, relabbed, and she's at 17, I believe it was, 17 or 18. I think it was 17. So I called my buddy up in D.C., Watkins, and he does a lot of research with vitamin D. He says, Walt, let's do 20,000 BID. So 20,000 twice a day. So that's 40,000 a day. We went 3 months. It was 24. He goes, I don't know. He says, that's not good. And I said, well, we got to research. Well, less than a week later, he calls me. He says, Walt, did you see the study just came out this morning on magnesium, the effect on vitamin D? I said, yes, I saw it this morning. He says, let's check that out. So we went to magnesium, to bowel tolerance, and did another 3 months, and she was at 97. She didn't have enough magnesium. Why are we deficient in magnesium? Why is 85% of America deficient in magnesium, we're told? Because the number one diagnosis is stress. When you're stressed, adrenaline goes up. When adrenaline goes up, God has a fire extinguishing system that goes off, and it dumps magnesium to buffer the cells and protect it from the adrenaline, we're told. And so if you're stressed out, you could be low in what? Magnesium. So it's not how much vitamin D you take a day, it's what is in the blood. You've got to do a blood test for that. Vitamin D deficiency is a current epidemic in our society, affecting 90% of the world's population, according to vitamin D expert Michael Hollick. We estimate that the vitamin D deficiency is the most common medical condition in the world. It is clear that most people are not getting enough healthy sun exposure. Why? They're inside. They're working. Or they're sitting inside on their telephones or TV. It was said in Sabbath school today that it was said 50% of the folks ain't working. Did God create us to work in an office or sit in the house? He created us to be outside. They didn't even have a house. They slept on the ground at night. We were created to be outside. Vitamin D deficiencies increase brain degenerative processes. A study published in the Archives of Internal Medicine showed that those who are classified as deficient in vitamin D were 42%. Listen to this, y'all. Those that were deficient in vitamin D were 42% more likely to have cognitive impairment. Meanwhile, those classified as severely deficient were 394% more likely to have cognitive impairment. This is the Archives of Internal Medicine. Do y'all know what your vitamin D level is? You need to. And the only way you're going to find out is not how much you take a day, but you need to get the lab work to find out. Because you want that brain working well. Why? We're in a time of battle, and we're about to go into a time as never before. And Danny and I were talking right before we came in, and Danny's going, it's going nuts. It's going nuts. It is going nuts. Would you agree? D deficiencies increase brain degenerative processes. The odds of cognitive impairment increase as vitamin D levels go down, says the study author, given that both vitamin D deficiency and dementia are common throughout the world. This is a major public health concern. Serotonin brain function. See what happens here is we go outside and as the sun comes through the eye, it stimulates the pineal gland to convert the tryptophan that you had in your flaxseed this morning, which you ground and ate within 15 minutes. It converts the tryptophan into what? Well, into serotonin. And so then, as the day goes on, if you don't eat a big supper, if you go to bed on time, your pineal gland converts the serotonin into melatonin to help you sleep. You got to have sunshine to make these happen. It is believed to help regulate mood and social behavior, appetite and digestion, sleep, memory, and depression. Serotonin deficiency symptoms: poor memory, low mood, difficulty sleeping, low self-esteem, anxiety, aggression, making the right decisions, temperance, I used to think that temperance was, I don't drink, I don't do drugs, and I don't do alcohol. I'm temperate. You know, no, it's a lot more than that. It's a whole lot more than that. Alcohol, yes. Drugs, yes. Tobacco, yes. Do y'all still do stop smoking programs here? Do y'all still do those? We used to do 3 to 4 a year, once a quarter here. Hardest place I ever did tobacco cessation programs was right here in Kernersville. When I would go to stores to put up signs, they said, no, I don't want to offend somebody over at RGR, an employee. I couldn't, they wouldn't let me put it on the radio station. They wouldn't let me put it on TV, the newspaper. We just couldn't do it here. This is the hardest place I ever did it. It really was. But let me share you a quick story. So I was back there in the kitchen. That's where we were doing it. And this fella, we did Tuesday night, Thursday night. And on Thursday night, I said, now everybody's going to quit. And we used to have quite a few folks come. We'd have 20, 30, 40 people. And the room was plumb full of people. And I said, everybody going to quit Sunday night because we're coming back Sunday night. And everybody raised their hand except one fella. And I said, is there a problem? Why can't you do it? He says, my mother-in-law's come to town this weekend. She'll leave Wednesday. He says, I'll quit Wednesday. And that happened in your dining room in the back there. And mother-in-law came to town. She left. Wednesday night he quit, and he was very successful, did well. But it's more than that. How about music? Can the music you listen to affect your brain function? But it's my body. I can do whatever I want to with it. Isn't that what they tell you? It's not our body. God says in Corinthians 6 that his son bought it. It don't belong to us no more. We're just caretakers. TV, what about that? Can that affect our brain? Gaming? Have y'all done Scott Retzmith? Yes. Tremendous, isn't he? Tremendous. Social media, Scott talks about that. As we grow and develop, very specific chemical reactions activate and deactivate parts of your genome at strategic times and in specific locations, essentially turning on our genes on and off. Epigenetics is a study of these processes and the factors that influence them. Do not let someone tell you you're genetically predisposed, ain't nothing you can do. One, that's mostly a misdiagnosis, not 100%. But it could be you're just North Carolina predisposed. You know what I'm talking about? You eat the same food your daddy ate, and your daddy ate the same food his daddy ate. And y'all got the same diseases. If your granddaddy smokes and he gets lung cancer, and your daddy smokes and he gets lung cancer, and you smoke and you get lung cancer, I have had medical doctors argue with me till the cows come home. That was genetically predisposed. But I go into the school system, and a kindergartner say, Mister, that's because you smoke. It's not all genetics. But yes, there is some genetics, but here's hope. Through epigenetics, we're learning that through these laws that we're talking about this morning, you can even change your genes. And that is so cool, what they're finding in epigenetics. It is a law of the mind that it gradually adapts itself to the subjects upon which it is trained to dwell. I mention this to every place I go that I teach this. Do you know where I learned that? Anybody want to guess where I learned that? Come on, elders. Come on, board members. Pardon?
I said it's Fred Rogers' favorite quote.
That's exactly right. Fred Rogers would say that. Back in the board meetings. He would read that before we started. Sure was. It's right here. It is true. It is a law of the mind that it gradually adapts itself to the subjects upon which it is trained to dwell. Y'all had a huge impact on my life. You really did while I was here. It is the law of the mind that it will narrow or expand to the dimensions of the things with which it becomes familiar. The mental powers will surely become contracted and will lose their ability to grasp the deep meanings of the Word of God unless they are put vigorously and persistently to task of searching for the truth. Do we search for the truth? Do we search? Or we just sit there and let it feed in? Whatever someone else searched. The mind will enlarge if it is employed in tracing out the relation of subjects of the Bible, comparing Scripture with Scripture, and spiritual things with spiritual. Go below the surface. The richest treasures of thought are waiting for the skillful and diligent student. We've got to dig it. It's gems, and God has it there if we dig. We're almost finished. Adequate oxygen. Can you imagine putting that thing on that Bugatti? His air filter? I don't think it'd work too good. Effects of air pollution on the brain. We're fortunate when I fly into LA, if I go out there to speak. I mean, who's flown into LA? You fly in, and it was so interesting to fly out there during COVID. You didn't have that smog. That was interesting. Effects of pollution on the brain, children's psychological and motor development is negatively affected. Negatively impairs the brain white matter, which affects nerve conduction speed, brain inflammation. Negatively affects executive functions such as planning and memory. Cognitive impairment. Increased behavioral problems. Crime rates increase. That's NIH. But it's not just pollution, because you don't have a whole lot of pollution here. But are you breathing like a chihuahua? Or do you have good diaphragmatic breathing? Who's taking voice? Did they teach you diaphragmatic breathing? Who's taking a wind instrument? Did they teach you diaphragmatic breathing? Yes, they did. We need to have diaphragmatic breathing. Ellen White says that we need to have diaphragmatic breathing. We live longer, she said. Fresh air has many health benefits, improves the brain's ability to function, gives clarity to the mind, improves concentration, boosts learning abilities, gives a sense of happiness and well-being by altering brain levels of serotonin, and promotes quality sleep. Kills bacteria and viruses in the air. Rest. A sleepy person's brain works harder and accomplishes less. A single night of poor sleep is linked to less sufficient filtering, meaning one's brain has issues picking out important or relevant nuggets of information from all the insignificant junk one's senses absorb. Do we absorb insignificant junk? Do we need to be able to filter those out to have discernment? Satan's throwing stuff at you constantly. Sleep can affect that. Mayo Clinic finds the following on sleep and brain function. Getting at least 7 hours of quality rest each night is essential for optimal health. Harvard is now saying at least 7.5, but Harvard is flirting very, very hard with 8 hours. I expect Harvard to change pretty soon. Sleep provides the foundation for all daily habits and decisions. Sleep deprivation can negatively affect mood and temperament, as well as one's ability to focus on daily tasks. Lack of sleep influences what and how much one eats. It's not just how many, there's three major things I look at for sleep. How many hours are you getting? Hours. How many hours are you getting? I figured most of y'all understood that. Number two, what time are you going to sleep? We now know that from 9 to 10, see, when we were in school, when Danny and I were in school, in A&P, we did not know that the brain had the lymphatic system. It was not until 13 that was really started coming out, 14 when it was really becoming published. The brain has a lymphatic system. It's called the glymphatic system. And from 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock, the brain does a deep clean. And from 10 o'clock to midnight, it does a thorough clean and flushing of the brain. And if you ain't asleep, you ain't flushing the toilet. It's not working. And you're missing it. So that's number two. And the other is, are you having contiguous sleep? Or men, are you waking up 6, 7 times to go to the bathroom? at night because of prostate issues. Ladies, are you waking up? And then when you wake up, you're worrying about the kids, the grandkids, or anything else you can worry about. And you go to sleep, wake up again, and start worrying again. We need that REM sleep, and people are not getting that today. It's very important. Sleep allows time for the mind and body to recover from the day's work. During the rapid eye movement, REM stage of sleep, the brain sorts the important information from the unimportant and files long-term memory. This is very important, y'all. If this stage of sleep cycle is shortchanged, mental focus and acuity can decrease. Sleep deprivation has a propensity to make one feel cranky, short-tempered. There's just so much here. We're running out of time. This was interesting. Look at this one. And this is coming out of science. Sleep can help boost one's motivation and willpower, making it easier to fend off temptation. That's science telling us that. Is that important? Preparing the brain for battle? It is. And this one. It's the last one I'm going to look at. Can anybody tell me where that's located? What is the setting? A schoolhouse. In every Florida school and administrative building will be required to display "In God We Trust," according to a bill passed by the Florida House on Wednesday. The bill states the phrase must be displayed in a conspicuous place. When Tennessee K through 12 public students begin classes next month, the nation's motto, "In God We Trust," will be required to be posted somewhere in their schools. I go into the school system in our county, and I teach this issue. I call it the brain team. And I'm teaching these kids this information. And it's so important for the brains to function well. And if you teach them this, it's also going to affect childhood diabetes. It's also going to affect, other issues, because other lifestyle issues will take place. Used to, when I go in the school system, I'd have to say to the kids, when I got to this one, I say, take out your money and look at what your money, and what does every piece of money have on it? See, I couldn't say it. Wouldn't let me. And the kids would say, "In God We Trust." I said, yep, that what you just said is so important. Doctors in California found if we do that, what you just said, then you'll be healthier. When this was passed, it took the bridle off. And now I can talk to the kids about "In God We Trust," because it's in the main office in the school I go to the most. I'll be there this coming Tuesday. Again, I go every month, and I go into other schools in the county. And it's in a prominent location. And I can say, "In God We Trust." Is that important? See, when people come and see me, and as they walk out, I'll say, don't forget the most important thing. And that's prayer, trusting in God. It's not lifestyle changes that heals them. It is God that heals them and blesses that. Now, we need to do that. It's a relationship of applying both between us and God. Arkansas schools to display "In God We Trust." A new law in South Dakota now requires all public schools across the state to feature "In God We Trust" motto on display. You ought to see the churches I go to in other parts of this country. New York City, California, Washington State. When I talk about this, they cannot believe that that's required by the state. They don't live in the Bible Belt. Though South Dakota's not in the Bible Belt. But that's an interesting state. Kentucky is the latest in a line of states requiring "In God We Trust" motto in public schools. It's on our bills. It's on our coins. It's on our police cars in our town. We even have it on all the fire trucks. As we look at preparing the brain for battle, I want to leave you with this. We've got it on our money. We've got it in our schoolhouses. We got it on our police cars, and we have it on our fire trucks. But I ask you, do you have it on your hearts?